Hey folks, how's it going? Dr. Spin, eclectic album reviews and general musical meanderings. I hope that your self-quarantine is going well. I, for one, have been collecting music on the side since the end of January, since I was a more free man at that time, felt like. But especially since we've been kind of locked in the last couple of weeks, I've been getting a couple other pieces of the puzzle put together. So I now have for you another 6 album roundup of music that I've been sort of listening to in the background. These kind of overview posts are never meant to be super in-depth. They're just kind of superficial, scratching the surface listenings for some of these things. And I will go back later on, and if things reveal themselves on albums as I'm going through them, listening to them more, then we'll do dedicated posts on them as you go forward. But to keep this from going too long, I want to go ahead and get into it. So the first one of the 6 is Steve Hackett's At the Edge of Light. This is a 2019 album. He's best known for being the guitar player for Genesis' kind of classic progressive lineup. But he left the band shortly after Peter Gabriel did and started his own solo career on the side, and has been actually pretty prolific in that. This is his 25th album. But I have virtually none of his solo work. I have his first debut album, Voyage of the Acolyte, and that's it. And I haven't really followed his stuff otherwise. So this album got quite a bit of good press in the sort of progressive rock circles, and a lot of people were praising it, so I checked it out. The song that really caught my attention was Under the Eye of the Sun. And I saw a video for it, and I immediately felt a connection with it. It got sort of at the root of all the progressive tropes that I like so much.
Of dreams, towering peaks touch the sky, through the bones of the earth, spirit wind sighs. Within the living tree, sing as one, beneath the eye of the sun. On the trail of the wind, beyond time and space, rainbow rain.
This song feels so much like a Yes track to me. It really has the energy and the drive and that kind of nice big vocal choral approach, most of which is done in production, but still has the same effect of being this overwhelming kind of like hands in the air, ecstatic feeling to the song. That sort of lush orchestral palette that Hackett is accessing on that song pervades the entire album. On the one hand, a lot of the orchestral things you hear on the album are synthetic and the studio stuff. But then he brings in live musicians to give it the resonance that it needs on top of that synthetic stuff. And he seems to have a pretty good ear for how things balance and blend together. I think music is a really strong offering. What kind of rubs me the wrong way about it is that some ways he's sort of a colonizer in a way. It feels very odd for an older English gentleman to write a story about a slave traveling across the U.S. to find freedom in the North, in the North during Civil War times. It doesn't really feel like it's necessarily his story to tell. Ultimately, I think that his guitar playing is stellar, and he's musically there's a lot going on with the album that I really like. A lot of his contemporaries really aren't producing at a convincing level anymore, in my opinion. So to have gotten this album and discovered it and really think that he's playing probably at the best I've ever heard him play. His guitar playing is fantastic. I would suggest the album with some caveats in the way that he sort of uses subjects in his music. Now to flip that on its back, let's take a look at Avery R. Young, Tubman. This is a guy that the more I peel back and layers on, the more fascinating it is. He's a sort of interdisciplinary artist. He sings, he does poetry, he's an educator in the area of Black studies, African American studies. He's also an advocate and an activist in that sphere. African American music is extremely complicated. Its history goes back very far, and it's a history that's not told very often. What I really like about Tubman is that it sort of feels like a crash course in what's important in African music up to this point.
Now pray it down loud. Keep the sun from her like husband saved. Hey, just that. The fact that I can come home and so cold. The fact that I can come home and so cold. I can use a gun. It makes me happy.
His use of historically important African-American styles really pulls the album together in a very interesting way. And this album is also supposed to be a companion piece to a book he released called Neckbone. And the book is it's a book of poetry. And a lot of the themes apparently that are on this album are tied into that book. So now I'm very curious about going to look through that book and see if I can get more insight on the album. Next up is Dumama and Kechou. Dumama and Kechou is a South African duo. Dumama is South African, and Kechou is a Armenian German who was living in South Africa whenever he met up with Dumama. Dumama was a student of Masadini, who is a celebrated South African musician and instrument maker. And she really delved into some more traditional styles. You can hear her on the album using Xhosa click language whenever she's singing. And she melds this with this sort of jazz loop-based style that Kechou is working in. And it's a very interesting blend. It wasn't what I expected when I first got into the album. It's a lot softer and a lot more meditative than I expected, but after getting used to the feel of the album, there's a lot of it that I really do like. It makes excellent house music because it's something that you can kind of groove to, but it's also not so boisterous that it forces its attention on the listener. Okay, next up is Dana Jean Phoenix's PixelDust. Dana Jean Phoenix is a synthwave artist from Canada, and she has some training in both musical theater and in contemporary composition, and also spent some time in Second City improv classes. So she's a pretty strong performer. She knows how to put forth an image. Her whole identity is based on recreating the 80s from a very innocent point of view. She wants to try to recapture sort of the positivity of a person's youth by tapping into that nostalgia that people associate with the 80s especially. And I think she's actually really good at it. My philosophy on nostalgia is that it always refers to an idealized past, and really many of the synth sounds you hear on Dana Jean Phoenix's album wouldn't have existed in the 80s. They didn't have synths that really made those kinds of sounds. But she's taking the things that we associate with the 80s and kind of filling them out, making them more full. Sometimes the lyrics border on a little bit cheesy, but to be honest, a lot of 80s music that she is referring to is kind of hokey. It is kind of cheesy. So I think that a lot of what she's doing is intentional as far as just kind of keeping the tone of her lyrics light and not making it too heady. But it's interesting because even though she's referring to the 80s in her music, a lot of her lyrics refer to very contemporary things. She talks about things like email. Well, why you wouldn't talk about email in 1983? It wasn't even a thing. So she's a really fascinating character that I even if I have some issues with her music as far as the songwriting goes, I really respect her mission statement and how she's creating this whole 80s nostalgia thing from her own perspective. Okay, next up is Anna Meredith. Anna Meredith's FIBS album. Has been a celebrated and an award-winning composer in various venues in Europe and in Scotland. But it's kind of as a side project has been kind of doing this semi-pop experiments. And it's interesting to call them pop because they're not really, although there are some examples of her writing kind of more standard songs, most of it's pretty experimental instrumental stuff. It's sort of this ecstatic electronic music that's really textured and varied and energetic. ensemble is really unusual. She's a clarinet player as well as a synthesist. She has a tuba in the group. She has a cello. There's a percussion, both drum set and mallet percussion, a guitar player. And she calls on all these sounds and what she's doing. And my understanding is that this live ensemble also is a very good live performance. I've heard rumors of her performances really being something very special. Musically, she does some very fascinating things as far as just structure goes, and she really likes to play with the beat. One of her favorite things to do is present a rhythmic pattern, and then when the drums enter, whenever she enters with more of a backbeat, she puts it on a part that is not so apparent, so it feels like the beat kind of turns around, and it makes things seem very disorienting and complicated whenever that happens. But then, of course, after that next phase has happened, and she moves on to the next part of the song, that has become comfortable, and then she adds something more uncomfortable and awkward. She's always kind of like, her songs are sort of linear in that they build in each other. They're not super circular as far as having verse, chorus, verse, except for a couple of her more pop offerings. Finally, and this is the one I'm really, really super excited about, is Venetian Snares. And I'm going to try this. I'm have to work on that one. All of the songs in this, as well as the album's title, are all in Hungarian, because the album was partially inspired by Aaron Funk, who is Venetian Snares, a trip that he took to Hungary. I discovered Venetian Snares about 2 years ago whenever I found the traditional Synthesizer music album, which is an album that I really, really loved when it came out. And the following year I did a review on that one. And try to think about other albums of Venetian Snares to look into. And it turns out that he is also extremely prolific, and he doesn't have as long a career as, like, say, Steve Hackett does. But he's released like 25, 30 albums. And so it's very difficult to see where to get in. But after some poking around, I'd read that this particular album had quite a bit of critical praise. So I use it as a starting point to kind of get into the rest of his catalog. And man, it's a mind-blowing album. Whatever you think any of these tracks are when they start out, they are not that by the time it finishes. Most of the album presents itself as sort of almost like minimalist classical music. And then they evolve into these breakbeat things, and they become extremely intense while still holding on to that orchestral scope. Really great orchestral groove setup that he basically just deconstructs over the course of the song. By the time it's at its end, it's just explosive noise sometimes. And there'll be the one complaint I have about the album is that every now and then that texture, the sort of explosive noise thing, kind of goes on just a little bit too long in a couple of places on the album. But to tell you the truth, it really doesn't matter. It kind of gives it the kind of contrast that it needs, because then there's songs in here that are very sweet and also very almost disturbing. They have this kind of underlying darkness to them that's very difficult to overlook. Really, really fascinated by this album. I've been listening to it more and more, and I've had almost like maybe some just nearly religious experiences listening to it. A really adventurous album with a consistently executed vision. Worth checking out. If drop what you're doing and go just listen to a couple of the tracks and see what you think. Okay, so that's the 6 albums I have for you guys for this particular roundup. I appreciate you hanging around. Next week, I'm going to come back and have another full album review. I'm going to continue my Marillion series, so please tune in for that. If you like the video, please subscribe it and like it, share it to your friends. I really appreciate everybody's great feedback. I've gotten a lot of really inspiring comments from people, so that kind of thing keeps you going, and I really appreciate it. So if you want to, share it out. And until I see you guys next week, I'll catch you on the flip side.